Of his previous position, Mayor John Tory has come out in favor of a plan to add tolls to the Gardiner and the DVP. And to explain why he now supports road tolls, we're joined by Mayor Tory. Thank you for coming out this morning.
Good morning, a pleasure.
Did you lose sleep over this?
Well, you lose sleep over these things because you know they're going to be controversial, but what I slept very well on was the notion that I have a plan to build transit. It's a 15-year plan for the first time as opposed to doing one project at a time, and that I knew I had to answer the question, how are we going to pay for it? Because we simply have to build the transit to fix the traffic that is a nightmare. And so if you're going to build the transit, you have to answer the question which previously people haven't been willing to answer, which is, how are we going to pay for it? And I think this is the fairest way between a choice that involves massively raising property taxes, which I didn't think was a good idea, or selling assets, which I thought was unwise. You can only sell an asset once, like a Toronto Hydro, or something like this that provides a revenue stream and frankly gives the opportunity to people who don't live in the City of Toronto to make a small contribution to the cost of roads they drive on that City of Toronto taxpayers pay for entirely.
But how do you plan on getting the public on board with this?
Well, I mean, I think the public are more accepting of the notion that we have to spell out honestly, which I've tried to do, how you're going to pay for transit. I think they've realized we've got to the point in this city region where just doing nothing and saying we can't afford it, we don't have any money, is not viable. Sooner or later the city will strangle itself on its traffic, and so I think they're accepting of the fact you have to do something. And I think when they think about the options, the alternatives, massive property tax increases, selling assets, or doing this, they will conclude, not necessarily happily, but they'll conclude this is the most sensible, fair way to do this, and that's why I picked it.
And have you thought about perhaps going to the feds for some money there? And
oh, I'm doing that. I mean, believe you me. Well, again, it's funny because I've been asked this morning earlier about a point of gas tax or a point of sales tax, and I'd be delighted if the other governments would like to say that they would allow us to put that kind of charge on, because it would be much simpler and it would be spread across everybody, and at least I'd be delighted to have that discussion. But up until now, I can just tell you, when we raise those kinds of things, including in the report that came out yesterday, income tax, sales tax, gas tax, those other governments just say, no, those are ours, thank you very much for asking. And so that's why you end up with something we could do, which is road tolls. And again, none of these things are going to be appetizing. Nobody's going to have a parade in my honor or the City Council's honor on any of those alternatives, but the bottom line is we need the money, we have a plan, we need to pay for it, and it's going to fix the traffic over time, which is what we really have to do.
If this does come to fruition, how quickly would this be rolled out? This isn't
I think it'd be at least a couple of years, because first what you have to do is decide on the details, how much, how, is it flat rate versus distance traveled and all those kinds of questions. And then you have to go and procure the technology, and I would certainly want to see us have the simplest and most advanced technology to do this, so you're not spending money on technology you don't have to. So it'd be a couple of years, but the bottom line is we're at least going to get on with doing something to answer the question, how are you going to pay for the transit we so desperately need in order to fix our traffic woes?
Be honest. I know it was obviously a hard decision, not made overnight, but did you talk to Barb, your wife, about this, and what was her reaction?
Yeah, I mean, she's pretty good about just saying, look, if you think it's the right thing to do, and she always just tests me by saying, what does your instinct tell you? And my instinct told me that at this point in time, in 2016, this was going to be the fairest and most effective way to raise a fairly large sum of money to pay for transit. And I'll tell you what she really believes is right, is that we can't go on just saying, well, forget about it, or we'll deal with that another day, or whatever. We got to do it now.
But is it worth possibly losing the next election?
Yes, it is, because doing the right thing for the city, which I think is to build the transit and to be honest about how to pay for it, for the first time to actually be straight with people and say we have to pay, it's not free. I think getting that transit built and getting the traffic better is one of the main reasons I was sent to do this job. And so if people decide that they want to defeat me because the way I'm trying to go about it is not to their liking, and they find somebody, by the way, who has a better plan, those who are going to take me on this had better be prepared to answer the question, well, how are you going to pay for transit, or are you just not going to build it? So Barb was totally content with that, and she's pretty good to be supportive in that way. And if I'm wrong, if she thinks I'm wrong, she will tell me. And of course, there's nothing like a spouse to be your most important advisor. When we're alone at home, there's just the two of us there, and she'll say, this is not right.
Thank you so much, Mayor.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it.
Okay, I called when he came in. I said, here comes Mr. Popularity, because over the last 24 hours, I'm sure that you have heard everything from everyone. Yesterday, you confirmed it, that it looks as though we're considering tolls for the Gardiner and the DVP. And you were immediately slammed saying, well, you didn't campaign on that, and calling this a flip-flop.
Yeah, I mean, what I did do when I became the mayor was said that I was going to bring to an end this cycle where they've approved transit projects, many of them over the years, to the point where the list now, including transit and other things, is $33 billion, but not spelled out how we're going to pay for them. And as a result, they don't get done. And I think, Kevin, the traffic is crippling. The traffic is nightmarish in the city now, and we cannot just let that go on. And the best solution to get the traffic moving is to build transit, and you have to spell out how to pay. And I had three choices. One, massively increase property taxes, which I chose not to do. Two, sell assets like Toronto Hydro, which you can only sell once. That's part of the problem with selling assets. And three, to pick some other kind of thing that will produce a revenue stream and has, I believe, the added advantage of saying to some people who live outside of the city of Toronto that if you want to drive on these roads that we, the City of Toronto taxpayers, look after, you might make a small contribution to helping keep those roads up, and that's what road tolls are about in part.
I mean, we consider going to the province. I mean, I agree with you. I think that for people like me who live outside the city, that maybe a bigger chunk of what we pay needs to go towards Toronto roads. But, you know, I want to do something here because already people, I mean, you know what? I don't want road tolls. I don't think you do. I don't think anybody does. So what I want to do is I want to try and turn this around into a conversation.
Yeah.
Nobody wants road tolls. Granted, that's the end of that debate. Nobody wants them. So what do we do instead? I threw out a figure of $150 million a year, right? Is that what we want to raise about?
I think we need at least that in order to pay for these transit projects. But yeah, let's pick that number and say that would be a good start. I mean, the tolls produce somewhat more than that, but yeah, let's take that number and see what people say. Because as long as they have an answer as to how we're going to pay for the transit, I'm interested in listening to what those answers are.
So you haven't ordered the toll booths yet. So we have some time to decide. So you don't want tolls. I want you to tweet us right now. What is your idea? And you know what? I've heard politicians cut your salaries and this and that. I want what's realistic right now. I mean, that's a small start, maybe. I don't know. So, Winston, what are people saying this morning? What are some of the ideas?
Yeah. So the suggestions from people, Aussie saying allocate 1 cent per liter. So putting a tax on gas. Is this something that would be feasible?
Would be very willing to consider that, except that is a decision of the Ontario government. And the Ontario government, as thus far indicated, and we'll cover a number off, sales tax, income taxes, gas taxes, those are their taxes, and they're not saying that they have any willingness to allow us to have a cent or a portion or any part of that. We get a little bit of the gas tax now, but just a little bit.
Would 1 cent offset?
Well, 1 cent, I forget how much it raises, but it raises a fair bit of money. Okay. And if the province wants to talk now, which they haven't previously really been willing to do, about putting 1 cent or some such number on a liter of gas, I'm very willing to have that conversation.
Problem is, and this is what my big argument about gas taxes is all the time, we're going to put it towards transit, and they don't. It goes into general coffers. If I saw that 1 or 2 cents, and I could be absolutely guaranteed, promised, 100%, stamped at no erasing, that 2 cents is going directly to transit. I'm for a 2 cent.
And I want people to know that with the tolls, I have said it will go into a separate fund, independently directed by some trustees. I don't even care if you can appoint them if you want, Kevin.
Could I?
And that it will be audited every year by the Auditor General, so people will know that it hasn't leaked off into some other place.
Okay, gas tax. Good. I think a good idea. I know a lot of drivers would disagree, but I'd rather a cent or two here.
It requires provincial approval, and so far they've not indicated any interest in doing that. I'm not being critical, I'm just saying that's a fact.
Okay, all right. What else, Wes?
Carol Brooks saying the app that you have for parking works quite well. So maybe implementing overnight parking rates so people who do park in the city will pay more. I don't know if that would raise $150 million.
Yeah, I mean, you can get a little bit of more money to the Green P. Like now we get about, I think, $20 million from them, so you might get 25. And if you had overnight parking, a lot of people pay for overnight parking now through the permits they buy and so on. But again, I think that's an idea, but it's not going to produce enough money to really build multi-billion-dollar transit projects. That's just the truth.
All right, Wes?
A suggestion from David Woodford that involves investment, creating a casino downtown that would implement additional taxes. That would
we hear lots of that.
I have led in the process of having the council change its mind so we would allow a casino out by the airport at Woodbine, but I do not believe that a casino in the downtown downtowns of great cities don't have casinos. It's not the way I think you build a great city, but I have said we could have a casino which I think will create jobs in the northwest part of the city and produce some money, but again, maybe $10 million. And so when you're talking about building a subway for billions, $10 million doesn't go too far, even if you get it every year.
Okay, one more.
From Specs on Toronto, put a for sale sign on many Toronto-owned vacant properties to generate money for the city.
We are doing that, and so that part I agree with again. But you can only sell a piece of land once. So we'll sell some of these lands and real estate, as appropriate. We will not sell hydro. I've said no to that. But we will sell some of this land, and it will produce some money that will help to pay for transit. But you can only sell a piece of land once.
Okay. Is he hanging around, or are we a little longer? Are you able to stay for a little bit, maybe
I'm
8:30?
not
Do you have to
entirely
run?
sure. I think I have to go off.
Does he have to run? He's got to go?
Gotta go.
Don't you?
She's my boss.
Run your life. Don't
boss.
let them do that.
Well, actually, my real boss is my wife, but then she's my other boss.
Come here for a second. Come on in. Can you introduce? I mean, because
This is Amanda Galbraith, my boss.
Amanda.
And she's appearing on TV last night. She was at the Toronto Life, a big party last night, so she's.
Oh my gosh. I am. Coffee's keeping me going.
Yeah, but she is my boss.
Only sometimes.
All right, so. Folks, honestly, I you know what? It's fine to complain and all that, but do you have a better idea? He's willing to listen.
I am.
At John Tory. If you have a legitimate good idea, please get through to the mayor. He will listen. He watches every single tweet that comes
does
in.
not involve, do you like sex and do you like to travel?
That's right.
We're talking about a legitimate good idea here, okay?
A good
I get a lot of the
idea.
other
All
stuff.
right.
I don't need to ask people to send that in.
All right. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank
At
you,
John
Kevin.
Tory.
Thanks very much.
You know, let's work together on this one. All right. Let's go to Pay right now. Who's working out at Yorkdale.